You're listening to Wanderlust Diaries, the ultimate travel podcast for solo female travellers 40 and beyond who are ready to explore the world. Join me, Terri Reynolds, where we talk all things travel and why it's so important and what's stopping you from getting out there and exploring the world. We'll discuss the steps you can take now to fix it, empowering you to ignite your curiosity and set your heart free so that you have the confidence to travel wherever you want, whenever you want. Offering insights, tips, hacks, and remarkable women's stories along the way. So come on, grab your passport, pack your sense of adventure, and get ready to be inspired. Whether you're a first-time solo traveller or a seasoned globetrotter, Wanderlust Diaries is your community of like-minded souls, uplifting and supporting women over 40 who dare to explore. And welcome to the podcast. Today's guest is the Laura Ericson. Laura is a professional traveller, content creator, writer, and entrepreneur from Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And her work focuses on culturally immersive travel in off-the-beaten-path destinations around the world, such as Cuba, Morocco, and Colombia. I love it already. Laura creates travel experiences and group trips that have a positive impact and give back to misrepresented countries along the way. Now, Laura quit her 14-year career in higher education in 2021 so she could pursue her dreams and help other people get out there and see the world in a more authentic, intentional way. So, Laura, welcome to the podcast, literally off the back of one of your tours. I can't wait to hear all about this and to hear your story. And I love this as well. I think this is on your website. I believe in being a traveller, not a tourist. And my trips reflect that. And I totally agree with that as well. And so to start with then, can we talk about your why? What is the reason that you do what you do, that you started traveling, and what inspired you?
Yeah. So I started traveling when I was much younger, as a kid. And then when I was about 24, I entered a long-term relationship, and ended up marrying that person. And when I was 34, I got divorced. And when I got divorced and kind of started my life over, I looked back and realized that, for about a decade of my life, I really wasn't traveling the way I used to. I had lived in Spain when I was younger and was very adventurous. And then I found when I was in that relationship, I was really going to the same places over and over. I was going to Mexico every year, which a lot of Americans do just because it's close and easy. And so I decided I wanted to get back to kind of my roots and traveling to places that intrigued me that maybe weren't mainstream travel, if you will. But being divorced and being single and not having anybody to go with, I found that it was really challenging, especially when I wanted to go to these places that other people kind of deemed unsafe for female travelers. So that's kind of where it all started. I went on a trip to Colombia and found somebody to go with me from a Facebook group who I didn't know. And I told her I would plan the trip if she would just come with me so I wouldn't have to be alone. And she agreed. And we had an amazing time. And that kind of like sparked my idea of, if there's got to be more people out there like me who need this platform and vehicle, if you will, to travel, not alone, and also just more authentically, because group travel, I think, sometimes gets a bad reputation for being really touristy. And, everyone pictures kind of like the big tour bus of people wearing matching t-shirts and, being carted around from place to place. And I think like that is kind of sometimes the reputation that group travel gets, but that's not how it has to be. And so I got this idea. It was right after the pandemic. It was still kind of in the pandemic, to be honest, because it was 2021. And I was turning 40 and I was like, you know what, like now or never. I loved my job at the time. I had been doing it for a really long time. And I just felt like I said, now or never, like there really wasn't a better time to start something new. And, with the pandemic, I realized, the one thing that was kind of taken away from everybody was travel. And so although like 2021 maybe wasn't the best time to start a travel company, I also knew that was going to be the thing that everybody wanted to do the most once things cleared up after COVID. So Yeah, I quit my job in 2021, put in my 30 days notice, exactly a year ago or 2 years ago. And at the time, all I had was one trip planned to Mexico City with 4 people on it. And that was all I was going off of. It was pretty much just that and knowing I'm going to figure it out, but not really a
Yeah.
huge organized plan by any means.
I mean, yeah, when you think about, through the pandemic, that the people would be thinking about traveling, but a lot of people would have been dreaming about traveling anyway, because obviously that had been cut off from us. But how did you start then? That first trip that you did, how did you manage to get your clients? What were you doing to get your clients in?
Honestly, that first trip, it was 4 people and they were all my friends. And they didn't know each other. It was 4, individual friends that I got to agree to come with me. And that was it. At that time, quite honestly, like I couldn't get more people because I didn't have anything to go off of. I didn't have a website. I didn't have, a social media following. My Instagram was private with like 300 followers when I started my business. So I didn't really have a platform to start with. So from there, it was, building my website and opening up my Instagram and starting to post things more publicly, which I absolutely hated because I'm a very private person and I'm not really the type that like loves to blast my life on the internet. But that's kind of what I had to do in
Yeah.
order to get people on board. So I just started sharing like what I was doing and, every trip got easier. My first trip was 4 people. My second trip was 6 people. My third trip was 8 people. And then it was 10 and then it was 12. And, before I knew it, a year came around and my Mexico City trip was booked out at 14 people, like far, far in advance. So yeah, it's just kind of been full speed ahead since then, but it wasn't like an overnight success by any means.
No.
It still isn't, to be honest. It might look that way to people, but it's still a struggle. But it's definitely gotten easier. As I've built an email list and built more of a following online and had an online
Yeah.
presence.
And that's the thing, isn't it? You started off with just 4 people, but I would imagine though that starting that way, small, and building it up would have made it easier to progress.
Yeah, I can't imagine if when I started I had 14 people because I had
Mm,
no idea what I was doing. So it was nice to be able to practice on a small group, practice
yes.
on my friends. They're a little bit more forgiving than strangers might be. So those first couple of trips that had more people on that I knew on them than didn't know, like that made it a lot easier for me. And then it like slowly transitioned to more people I didn't know.
Mm,
And now I would say it's like a mixture. It's probably 50-50 only because I have a lot of repeat clients and a lot of people
of
who come back.
course.
And so usually I do know a good portion of the people on my trips because they've signed up for other trips with
Mm,
me or they are my friends or, friends of friends, whatever. But I always have a good amount of people that I know and a good amount of people that I don't. But generally the people on the trips don't know each other. So that's kind of the fun part is that they are generally all strangers. Somebody
yeah.
might come with their friend or their significant other, but for the most part, the trip is made up of strangers. And that always allows like this unpredictable element of not kind of knowing how everything's going to go. But I think that's to me is like the fun part is seeing how all of these people and personalities are going to mix together once they're on a trip together.
I love that. And so what's your biggest group so far? Did you say 14 that you've
Yeah,
got?
I usually don't go any bigger than that.
No.
That's kind of my max.
No, I was going to say, what's your, because the thing is, everybody wants a piece of you as well, because you're the leader, as it were. So trying to spread yourself, I would imagine, around quite a large group of people would be quite draining.
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
imagine. Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
it's quite honestly draining no
yeah.
matter what. Because I always have to explain to people that this is a job because it doesn't look like a job to people because it's travel. And so people see me in exotic locations and they see pretty pictures and they're like, I want your life. It must be so amazing. And don't get me wrong, it's great, but it's a ton of work and it's way more than what, people see on the surface. So much goes into this before a trip ever happens. And there's this, big long process of everything that goes into a trip. It's not just show up and I'm on vacation, because even when I'm on the trip, I'm working the entire time. I always say, like, the easiest way to explain my job is like being a wedding planner. Like a
Mm,
wedding planner isn't getting married. They're not the bride. They're not there to enjoy their wedding day. They're there to make it happen for the bride and the groom and for the guests, and to make sure that everything goes smoothly. That's my job. Like, I'm not on vacation. I've already been to these places. My job is to make sure that everything goes smoothly for the people on the trip so that they can have like the trip of a lifetime. That's my job. So even though I am in a really cool place, and I'm not complaining,
no.
it's work, and it is around the clock, 24/7 job.
No, absolutely it is. Of course it is. And like you say, people don't realize that. Because at the end of the day, it is a business. It is a business, and it's a business that you have to run. And you have to run it in such a way so that everybody is happy, because you've got a lot of different types of personalities, haven't you, when you've got a trip like that to take and you're taking care of them. There's a lot of personalities in there that probably, like I said, is they're all vying for your attention. And it's for you then to make sure that they do have a good time. Like I said, like a wedding planner, you have to make sure that they have a good time. I mean, I feel worn out just listening to you, really. So how do you, when you are away then and you are with your group, how do you take time for yourself? So that you don't, because I can imagine it would be quite overwhelming. You could get a little bit burnt out as well, I would think, if everybody's trying to pull at you. So what do you do for yourself when you're away?
I mean, that's a good question. Not enough, to be honest. I just like I said, I just got back from 2.5
Mm,
weeks of travel, and I did 2 back-to-back trips. One was a group trip to Morocco, and the second one was a scouting trip to Greece. And so those are 2 very different things that I do. Scouting is my first initial, visit to a country, in the planning, the early stages before I ever like launch a trip to that country. And then the group trip is what happens, that's what people sign up for, and then we actually go. So it was, interesting to have 2 of those kind of back to back, because they're such different
mm,
experiences. And the scouting, I would say, is maybe a little easier because there's not the people on it. So, I don't have that element, but it is still a ton of work. And
mm,
I'm packing maybe what should be 2 to 3 weeks of travel into 1 week, and making sure I see as much as possible and do as many things as possible and get as much content as I can, and then be posting it so people can see where I am and what I'm doing so I can advertise my trips. And that's a lot. To be honest, it's a
yeah.
lot. It's enough
Mm,
to just, it's a lot to just have to travel, because
yeah.
traveling can be really exhausting, but
Oh
then to
God,
have
yes.
to
Yeah.
constantly be showing people what
Yeah.
you're doing in a way
You're
that
on
is
it all the
engaging.
time, aren't you? It's 24/7. You're just on it all the time.
Yeah, yeah. I
Um,
don't I don't sleep a lot on these trips at all.
yeah.
And then once I get home, now I'm launching my Greece trips, and I have to still launch my Morocco trips because of the earthquake, which that's a whole nother story. I was there during the earthquake. So
Oh gosh, yeah.
um once I get home, then it's like full speed ahead to get my trips up and running and launched so that people can sign up for them. So
It's a cycle, isn't it? You've got
yep,
you do your scoping, your scouting, then you come back, you plan it all, then you do the trip. And I suppose after the trip, then you've got like an evaluation,
yep. Then
to
it's,
do of how that went and how you can tweak it for next time, that type of thing.
yeah. And the more I do them, the easier it becomes. Like Mexico City, I'll be opening my 4th one next month. So I will have done that trip, 3 times by the time I open the 4th. So,
Mm.
I work with the same people now. I'm kind of doing more or less the same itinerary. I have my materials. Like, it's like teaching a class. The first time you teach it, it's a ton of work, and
Yeah.
then you refine and fine tune. And as you go on, it becomes a little bit easier every time, but you're always tweaking and making it
Mm.
better. And it's never just,
Always evolving.
yeah. And it's never just mindless,
Yeah.
work. It's work every time I do it, but it's a little bit less
Mm.
once I've done it a couple of times.
Yeah, it's like most things, I think, that once
Yeah.
you've done it a few times, it's great then to be able to tweak it. You can see where maybe there are little faults or something that you can make better, and you just make those little tweaks. While you just spoke of Morocco there, I mean, how do you plan for those an eventuality like that? Because you can't really. So how did you manage while you were there?
Yeah, you don't plan for something like that to happen. I mean, I
Mm,
don't know how you possibly could
mm,
prepare for all the things that could go wrong with travel.
mm,
I mean, Morocco hasn't had an earthquake in 150 years. So most people have never experienced this in their lifetime. And this earthquake hit a minute after I was supposed to land. My flight was scheduled for 11:10 p.m. We got a little bit delayed in Paris,
mm.
and the earthquake hit at 11:11. So if I would have landed on time, I would have either been landing when it hit, on the runway when it hit, who knows? But we were delayed about 20 minutes, so I was in the air when it hit, and by the time I landed, I turned on my phone and I had like 30 messages. And I'm like, that's never a good sign when I have that many messages at once. So I knew something happened, but I didn't know what.
Mm.
Three of the women, so this was a group trip for me too. It wasn't just
Mm.
I was in Morocco, I had a group
No,
coming.
exactly. Yeah.
So three women were there before me. They had already been there. And so one of them was on a rooftop in Marrakesh. And of course, like, Morocco's a big country, but this earthquake hit exactly where we were. So it's just like, what are the odds that this would happen
Mm,
exactly at the time we were all flying in the exact city we were? The epicenter of the earthquake was a little bit outside of Marrakesh, luckily. So
yeah.
we didn't really know though when I landed. It wasn't I the first thing I did was Google it. All I could find was that there was an earthquake, but there was nothing in the news, like nothing had been reported yet. Nobody knew about it except for the
Mm,
people who were in Morocco. And so first thing I did was text my parents.
mm,
I said, you're going to hear there's an earthquake. I'm okay.
mm.
And they said they hadn't heard anything, of course. And it took a while for people in the States to hear about it, but we got to the airport. There was broken glass falling off the ceiling. There was water pouring
Yeah.
in from the ceiling. It was basically just get us, in and out as quickly as possible. But we still had to go through the
Channel.
normal process that people go through when they arrive in a country. Our baggage, they told us we had to come get it the next day, and then we got in our van, and immediately all I saw were people everywhere outside,
Mm,
people sleeping in the streets, people, like cuddled up with their families, because nobody wanted to be in their houses, or their houses potentially didn't exist anymore.
mm,
So we got to our accommodation, which luckily was pretty untouched, I would say. Got to my room. I could see immediately that plaster had fallen off the walls.
yeah.
So of course, then I was immediately like, should I be staying here? Should I be in this building? Because everyone else was out in the streets, but I was so
Mm,
tired. I was kind of like, what options do I really have here?
mm,
And then the rest of my group, like I said, three of the women were already there. They were all safe. I checked in on them,
mm.
and then everyone else was in Madrid flying. So they're messaging me and they're like, should we still come? So I'm trying to, kind of get the pulse on the situation
Yeah.
without really knowing what's going on.
Mm,
But it seemed like the best thing for them to do was to come to Morocco. Um, that and, you know, my big thing is supporting countries that need
mm.
tourism.
Good.
And I was anticipating that Morocco was going to need people
Mm,
to come to their country and not pull out, which
mm,
is what a lot of people did. A lot of people saw that there was an earthquake, immediately canceled their trips.
mm.
And so but it was a very much like a snap decision. It was a judgment call to still have everybody come. I'm so glad we did, because it ended up being fine. And I think it made a more impactful experience for my group to kind of see what had happened there. Because it's one thing to read about it in the news, but it's another to see it firsthand. And so, and for them to talk to Moroccan people and
Mm.
ask them about their families and see if they're safe. And so many people thanked us for being there, for not leaving like everyone else did.
Yeah.
Because I was, and I would stay up late at night, and I was in like travel Facebook groups, and everybody was posting, I have a trip planned. I'm going to cancel it. I'm going to go somewhere else. And I was like keyboard warrior. I was like, don't go somewhere else. Like, come to Morocco. It's still safe to be here. They need your tourism. Like the worst thing you could do right now is cancel your trip. It's like after COVID and everything else, like they need the tourism.
Yeah.
And it was for the most part safe in Marrakesh. There were some buildings that were damaged, but overall the majority of the damage was in the Atlas Mountains. So they were okay, and they were like it was astonishing how quickly everything was back to normal there. Like the next day they had bulldozers out moving big boulders and they had people
Mm.
working really as normal. So they were like moving on with their lives. So they wanted the tourism. Everything was
Yeah.
open.
And of course, I think that the communication coming out of Morocco was quite slow. And I think that's probably why a lot of people pulled out of their holidays. And I think if there had been a bit more communication so that they understood that they didn't need to, they may
Hmm.
not have done that, but it is what it is. And lots of reading I did as well, they were all saying the same thing. Don't not come, please come. Everything's okay. We need you to come. We want you to come. And the amount of people as well saying, well, everything seems to be back to normal. It just looks, things like you said about the diggers or the bulldozers or whatever, they've all come in, they've cleared everything away.
Hmm.
And it's absolutely fine. You can come. It's absolutely safe. I just felt so sorry for the local people, that this has happened to them. Like you said, we just had COVID. And now for something like this to happen to them as well. It's somewhere I've not been to yet myself. I can't wait to go myself. But I just felt, you just had that feeling of everybody just go, everybody do what they were going to do. And a lot of people then that I was reading, they absolutely were saying that they were going to carry on with their holiday and continue with their travels around Morocco. And then they would fill us in then a bit later with, it's absolutely fine here, please come. So you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not to say there wasn't damage. Like I said, the Atlas
Oh,
Mountains
yeah.
area, like really, really had some damage.
Yeah,
And they're still working on repairing it.
of
But
course.
I think they're now in the how do we move forward phase instead of the
Yeah.
devastation phase. But
And
Marrakesh, which is kind of the hub of Morocco,
yeah.
overall was fine. So yeah,
Yeah.
if people are considering Morocco, there's nothing to be afraid of. I think there's also a stigma with traveling somewhere that just had a natural disaster and like it makes you look like, oh, I'm just going on vacation to a place that, is struggling and suffering. And so people worry about what that looks like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and I would argue, like I said, when you talk to the locals, they want you there because they need your tourism. They need your
Yeah.
tourism dollars. I went to Puerto Rico years ago, right after Hurricane Maria, like right after. And I didn't have the trip planned before the hurricane. I actually like planned it after. And they were pretty devastated there. I mean, I know there was like some small country, I can't remember what it was called, that like literally got like like doesn't exist anymore.
Wiped
It
out.
was so
Yeah.
bad. But there really wasn't a lot to do there outside of San Juan. Like the rainforest was demolished. Like,
Mhm.
but I wanted to go because I felt like it was the right thing to do. And I
Mhm.
went there and people were so grateful because nobody was going. Like that, no,
Yeah.
obviously most people don't want to spend their vacations in a place that just experienced a natural disaster. But I would argue like that's the time that they need you the most
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
go there and eat in their restaurants and shop in their stores and still
Mm.
show your support.
Mm. No, I love that. And so with your with the trips that you um take and the people that you take, I mean, what's the ethos behind your trips?
My trips really focus on positive impact travel. And so what that means to me is leaving a place better than you found it.
Mm.
There's this saying of like leave no trace, and
Mm.
obviously that's more with the environment and not leaving trash behind or whatever.
Yeah.
But I look at it as like you could leave no trace and maybe there's no sign that you were there, but why not leave a positive trace? Why not make something better?
Mm.
I don't think you should just exist in a place and use it, for lack of better words,
Mm.
when you can do things to make it better. And so, that's kind of a big part of what I do. And the other thing is just cultural immersive travel and focusing on places that maybe don't always get as many tourists because they have either a bad reputation or maybe a a dark past, or
Mm.
maybe they're just misrepresented in the media. And so those places always intrigue me. I do a lot of research on them. I generally find when I research them that they are safe and beautiful and wonderful. It's just that people can't get over whatever they have seen or heard about it. And so I will go there and explore and research
Mm.
and check it out for myself, and then bring groups back as long as I, deem it as a good place to do a group trip. But sometimes it is hard to get people over that barrier of,
Yeah.
this is a safe place to be. And I think a lot of people do want to travel to places that are popular. Like, they want to be able to say they're going to Paris. They want to be able to say that they've done, kind of the typical things, Bali, like,
Mm.
and there's nothing wrong with those places. It's just
Nope.
they tend to be really crowded and overpriced. And I think there's lots of other places in the world. So I just try to focus on the places that I feel like people maybe need a little bit more help to get to and to
Yeah.
navigate.
No, I agree. And I was talking to a guest previously who is in Colombia at the moment. And she said, she had to do a research because you hear of the drug barons and all the bad things about Colombia. And she arrived there. She was only meant to be there for 5 days, and she's still there, a long time later. And it is true, everyone's got a perspective of, and that could be because of media, what's in the media and what we learn via media streams. But if you take that time to actually research and then actually go and visit, you'll find a whole different country than you thought you were going to visit.
Absolutely. I always say, different or unknown, like, doesn't mean dangerous. I think
Yes.
a lot of times people think if they don't know a lot about something, then it's like not safe.
Mm.
Or if it's really different from their own culture, like Morocco is a great example, because to me, Morocco is culture shock for most
Mm.
Americans. Like,
Yeah.
that doesn't make Morocco unsafe. It's
No.
just different than what we know.
And so when you are putting your trips together, are you looking for a specific client? Is it just female? Could it be male as well? What are you looking for when you're putting your groups together?
Yeah, I would say, I don't really have like an age requirement or minimum or maximum on my trips. Well, I guess I have a minimum. I don't have a maximum, but I'd say generally my trips tend to be like 30 to 50.
Mm-hmm.
With, there's exceptions on either spectrum, probably more so on the above 50 end, but I'd say the average age of people on my trips is about 40.
Mm-hmm.
I do male and female. I tend to have more women, and sometimes I will do women only trips, but
Yeah.
my business is for men and women. And generally, like, what I'm looking for is people who want to experience a country in a more authentic way. Like,
Mm.
usually those people that, they want to be open to new experiences. They, want to see things that maybe they wouldn't see on their own. That's generally the feedback I get from even experienced travelers, because I think people think, like, if you go on a group trip, that means you're not well traveled or you're inexperienced or you're scared, or that's not true. A lot of people just go on group trips because they either want to meet people or because they don't have the time to plan their own trip, or they just don't want to. But even the people on my trips who are very well traveled and know how to plan their own
Mm.
vacations and trips, they'll tell me that the things that we do on these trips, they never would have done on their own. They never would have either taken the time to figure it out, or they just never would have found the things that we do. So I
Yeah.
really try to focus on these experiences that you don't find,
Mm.
everywhere else. It's not the things that everyone else is doing necessarily when they go to a country.
Yeah. And that's what I love about that, because as well, it's about trying to get those people in, whether it's women or men, but it's trying to get those people in who are a little bit nervous and may not want, they want to go off traveling. And this may be the perfect recipe for them. That although they're going on their own, that they're not on their own. They are with like-minded people. They are with somebody that can show them the way. So it takes all the pain out of trying to find your way, trying to learn about different things. And so that way it just makes it a bit easier, especially if it's your first trip. It makes it a lot easier, doesn't it, for those people as well.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of people who they come on, they come on a group trip and they'll say, "This is my first solo trip." And
Yeah.
at first when I heard that, I was like, "Solo trip? Like this is obviously not a solo trip. This is a group trip." But in a lot of people's minds, going on a group trip by themselves without their friends and their family and people that they know is going alone. That is traveling solo for them. It doesn't mean you're alone, but it's going without the comforts of the people that you know, and you still have to fly on your own. You still have to kind of navigate a lot of things on your own, and it's still scary for a lot of people. So
Yeah.
this just takes a lot of the questions and the research and all of that stuff out of it, because I'm really just there to hold people's hands if they want it.
Yes. You're like a comfort blanket, aren't you? Especially for, you all right, you may have seasoned travelers with you, done it all before, but those people who haven't, it's all so new to them and it is scary. And yes, they are solo travelers. They are just in a group of other solo travelers, majority of the time, aren't they? So it is their first solo because they're going on their own. Like you said, they're not with any friends or family. And very often they don't know anybody else until they actually meet the group, until everybody gets together. And I think that, to have that comfort blanket, especially the first time you go, is a fabulous way to do it. If you're not, there are some of us that will just go out, we'll just get on a plane and we'll go somewhere, but I would say that we're in the minority. I would say that there's a lot of people out there who would like to just, I've got somebody to hold my hand. This is where they're going to take me. This is what I'm going to do, but I'm still going on my own. And that is a massive, massive big deal for those people. And it's a win, isn't it, for them as well?
Yeah, and I have, people who I get a lot of divorced women or like recently divorced women, which is where a lot of my like 50 plus people come from. I have a lot of women that, they're starting their lives over at 50, 60, they're getting a divorce and kind of figuring out who they are outside of this relationship they've been in for a very, very long time. And so a lot of people haven't traveled without their spouse or haven't planned a trip without their significant other. I have people that they're married and their spouse just doesn't want to travel internationally. And so, good on them for going anyway, because a lot of people will just not travel if the person they want to go with won't go. So I also have a lot of just people who are single, who, they don't have like I was, or I should say am, my thing was like, I can travel solo. I've done it before. I just don't want to. Like, I don't want to experience amazing things by myself.
No.
Like, I can do it. I'm capable. I just don't want to. I would rather be with somebody. And yeah, you can meet people when you travel solo, but you're not guaranteed you're going to meet people. And sometimes it can be really hard to meet people when you're traveling alone. So this kind of like builds in a group of friends that you're guaranteed you're going to make a friend with somebody in the group. You'll probably make lots of them, but you're guaranteed you're going to find somebody that you jive with. So it takes that part out of it so that, then you have somebody to go shop with, or you have somebody to go hike with, or whatever. You can split off and, people aren't in a group the entire time. They get free time and they make their friends and they go do their own thing. So
yeah, exactly. And when you're in a group like that, if you do want to spend time on your own, you can. If you just want some quiet time on your own, that's great. You can do that. But knowing that the other people are around and that they're there and that you can do, that if you want to go there or there, somebody else will want to go with you. You're always going to have those people around you. And I think it's really important to understand that as well. I think there's a bit of a stigma as well around solo travel. That if you're solo traveling, you're solo traveling. So you're going on your own. And that's as you've proved with your business, that absolutely does not have to be the case. And I would imagine. Have you seen, so since you started your business a couple of years ago, have you noticed a bigger uptake recently? Or maybe, as your business is getting older, if you like, the longer you've had your business, Have you noticed there's more uptake in this type of travel as well?
I think group travel is very much a growing business. I've seen it explode in the last couple of years, almost like too much, if you ask
All
me.
right.
But um, I think a lot of it is because a lot of people are doing more of like the um, like Trova trip type trips where
Mhm.
like influencers can host a trip and then people sign up to travel with them.
Oh,
And so it's made it very easy for people to like host group trips,
mm,
which is fine. That's not the same thing as like what I'm doing.
no,
They're not planning or
no.
organizing or coordinating. They're just kind of they're getting the people to come and
Mm,
then they're going with them. And
mm,
that's a totally different experience than what I'm doing.
absolutely. Yeah.
But there's been a lot of that, because everyone wants to travel, of course, and, like, these people get to travel for free, maybe make a little money. So
Yes.
there's been a huge uptick in that type of stuff. I've seen it everywhere. Everyone wants to run group trips,
Mm,
mainly because I think people think it looks easy. They think it looks glamorous because you get to travel,
yeah.
but it's not traveling for fun,
No,
it's traveling for work, and so I think people need to really understand what they're getting into when they do that because
yeah.
the the goal of someone like me running group trips isn't like again it's not about me,
Mm,
it's about me creating these experiences for other people.
yeah.
um, for me this is just my job.
Mm,
If I was to choose where I would spend my time traveling, it wouldn't be to the same countries repeatedly. That's not how I would spend my vacation. So there's a lot of sacrifice that comes in with travel because you're gone all the time and then
mm,
you're missing things at home.
mm,
I miss a lot of things. My friends invite me to things and I'm always gone.
mm.
I'm missing holidays. I'm missing, events. I'm missing concerts. I miss my
Yeah.
dogs.
Do you find then it can be lonely, even though you're with people?
Oh
Do you
yeah.
find it can be lonely? Yes.
Absolutely, because it's, in my previous job, I was the boss. And so it's
Mm,
kind of like being the boss. Like it's lonely in leadership. And
it is.
even though even though I'm friends with the people on my trip and it's not the same type of relationship as, being a boss and an employee,
Yeah.
um, there's still, kind of everyone on the trip and then there's me.
Mm,
I'm still like kind of the enforcer of
yeah.
the rules and I'm still the person like making everybody be on time and sometimes you have to be the bad guy, just like when you're a boss, like, so I think like I'm always a little bit outside of everyone else, even though I'm involved and I'm integrated.
Yeah.
And I think people like that I'm integrated into my trips, but
Mm,
at the same time, like I don't think they look at me as the same as everyone else. So
yeah.
yeah, it is hard because everyone else gets to just kind of enjoy and be friends. And then I'm the one who's kind of always working and making sure everything's running. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it's hard.
You can't, when you've got a business like that, you can't just sit back and relax, because even if you
No,
are sat around a campfire, for example, you can't just sit there and think that and just shut down. Think, right, I'm
no.
here now and I'm just because you will always be thinking about the next thing, whether it's later that night, whether it's tomorrow morning, is the van ready? Is everything, is everybody going to be on time? That type of thing. You're always going to be thinking about what's next. So how do you put your boundaries in place? We touched on this a little bit earlier. How do you put your boundaries in place to make sure that you don't, so that's, oh, 2 seconds. Oh, I just need to plug my laptop in. I
Uh-oh.
just realized I hadn't plugged it in. I've got it plugged in. I've had it here the whole time. There we are. I shall probably be cutting that bit out of this podcast. Yeah. So how do you, no, so your boundary, we all need boundaries because we all go out there, we all put on, we're never truly ourselves when we go out into the world, no matter what we're doing. The only time we're truly ourselves is when we're on our own. So when you're in a group like that and you're forever thinking about the next thing, you do need some boundaries. Do you have you learned any along the way?
Yeah, I think it's forcing myself to take a break,
Mm,
to even if it's just taking a break to sit in my room and get work done or catch up on things. I need mentally like need space from people. I'm actually an introvert, and so being around people all the time is actually
Mhm.
very draining for me after a
Mm,
while. By the time the end of a trip comes, like as much as I love doing it,
mm,
it's very like emotionally taxing on me. I also like internalize everything.
I
So
do.
I
Yeah.
feel everybody's emotions. I feel when people are
Are you an
disappointed.
empath?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And so that's hard for me because
Yeah.
I feel I can sense in a second if someone's frustrated, and sometimes you can't do anything about someone's frustration. Like sometimes people are just going to be frustrated because you
Mm,
can't change it.
mm,
And that's hard. And so like I've learned I have to take space. Even my scouting trip I just went on, I brought two friends with me.
mm,
It was good that there were two of them because I could just say, "Hey guys, you guys go to the beach.
mm,
I'm going to go back to my room and get some work done.
mm,
I don't want to not go with you, but I
mm,
have things I have to catch up on." And that's hard because I always feel like I'm missing out on something, when
mm,
people get to go do things without me. But
mm.
like, I also know I'm going to be super behind and super stressed if I don't get things done. And
Yeah.
I've learned to go to bed earlier than I want to leave things for tomorrow. Sometimes just leave things till I get home because I try to keep up with everything and I just absolutely cannot. I probably have like 200 emails to catch up on right now.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
but I can't be physically present
Mm,
and like mentally present with my group if
mm,
I'm focusing on
yeah.
what's happening at home or my email or whatever
Mm,
else. So I really try when I'm on the trip to focus on the trip and anything involving the trip, whether that's
mm,
planning the next day or posting photos and videos. Like that's what I'm always focused on when I'm on a
mm,
trip. It's not all the other things that happen in my business because
yeah.
once I don't know how to explain it, but when I'm there, I'm there. And that's all I'm focused on for 10 days. I'm
Yeah.
not thinking about other things. Like
Um,
somebody just messaged me, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I texted you this while you were gone." And I'm like, I kind of recall seeing that, but
I was gone. Yeah. I
I'm
was
not I'm
away.
not mentally anywhere else. So I things kind of go in one ear and out the other when I'm on a trip because that's all I'm focused on.
So, okay. I mean, yeah, it sounds glamorous. Yeah. You're traveling around and you're going to all these lovely exotic places. If anybody was listening to this podcast now, thinking about doing something similar to you, what would your one piece of advice be to them?
I think starting a business is really hard. Any business is hard.
Mm,
Being an entrepreneur is the hardest thing I've ever done. So that's not to discourage people. It's just to prepare people for the
mm,
reality. It's lonely and it's really difficult.
yeah.
And then you add in the stress and
Mm,
the intensity of travel and all these other things. I think it's just, like anything, when you take your hobby and your passion and you make it your job,
mm,
you have to be careful because a lot of times that takes the fun out of it. And for me, to be perfectly honest, like sometimes that does take the fun out of travel for me because anything involving travel is now work for me.
yeah.
Even if I'm going on a vacation with my friends or everything I do is content
Mm,
potentially. It's
mm,
sharing with the world what I'm doing
mm,
even when I don't want to be. And so I think it's just having really realistic expectations about what this is and what it isn't, because I think like I said, what it looks like on the outside
yeah.
is not what it is. And if people are doing this just so they can travel for free, which is kind of what I feel like it gets labeled as, like that is not it.
No.
Um, so I work really long hours. It's very stressful.
Mm,
And like I said, I'm spending a lot of my time in the exact same places. So like that's not vacation. That's just traveling or
yeah.
working on location in a different place. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And when I was backpacking around the world, and I stayed in Australia for quite a while, I was in Melbourne, and I was working in Melbourne, and after I stayed there for about 3 months, I think, working, and after a couple of months, maybe 6 weeks or so, I was walking to work along a gorgeous esplanade with all these palm trees, and there's the ocean, but it all just became very, very familiar. And that spark of oh my gosh, I'm in Melbourne. You know, when you do something and it becomes very familiar and it's very similar every single day, you know, you don't have that same feeling, do you, about it?
Nope, there is nothing like going to a new place for the first time.
Yeah,
Like that magical feeling you get when you see something for the first time,
yeah,
that feeling can't be reproduced and you won't feel the same way the second time and then
yeah,
the third time and the fourth time. Then it's just okay, I'm here to do the same things again. And
yeah,
that's where it really does become work.
mm,
And so yeah, it's there. Like I said, I just went to Greece for the first time. And so
mm,
that was amazing. Like I absolutely loved it. And everything was new to me and everything I saw was brand new. And like, that's that like kid at Christmas feeling.
yeah,
You don't get that when you go back.
no,
Eh, And sometimes I'll feel a little bit of it the second time.
mm,
Like I'll be happy to be back and I'm like, wow, this is great, and but then like by the third time, it's not that I'm not happy to be there. It's
mm,
just like, okay, yep, I'm familiar. I've seen this before. I've done this before.
yes,
There's just not a lot of like new experiences.
yeah,
So it
and
definitely
that's
just,
and that's the best thing about going somewhere new, isn't it? You know,
yeah,
I'm not one of those. I'm not a serial holiday maker where I would just go back to the same place year after year. There, people do that, and there's nothing wrong. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. There's not. You know, if that's what you're comfortable with, you do with what's comfortable for you. But I'm not one of those. Once I've been somewhere, you know, and I've been there a couple of times, that's it. I'm ready to move on and go somewhere
mhm,
different because I want that feeling, you know, that when you get off that plane, off the boat, or wherever you are, you've got that new, it's all the newness is hitting all your senses, isn't it?
absolutely. And I think, of course, there are other people that want to keep going back to the same place because
Mm,
they're familiar with it and it's easy. But
mm,
I think a lot of people want something new and they want something
mm.
different. I think
Yeah.
that's a huge part of travel is having new experiences. And if you're
Yeah.
going back to the same places,
Mm.
again, nothing wrong with it, but you're less likely to experience as many new things, I think.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
just learning a new culture for the first time.
Yeah.
There's nothing like learning a new language and just experiencing all the newness of a
Absolutely.
new place. When you're familiar with it, it's like, okay, like I know what to expect here.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
just takes a little bit of the novelty out of it.
No, it does. It absolutely does. And like you said, there's nothing wrong with the familiarity. If that's what you want, then, you know, go for it. But I just think sometimes we're all in our little comfort zone sometimes, aren't we? You know, and it's just dragging you out a little bit just to see something different that's out there, and giving yourself a chance. And if you just give yourself a chance to go and do that thing, it makes a massive difference. Absolute massive difference. The feeling you get from it. I remember the first time I went traveling, the feeling when I came back, you know, the lessons I'd learned, how it changed my life and what I decided to do when I came back as well from that. You know, I didn't just come back and go straight back to my job. I was a late developer. I didn't go to uni until I was in my 40s. You know, I didn't do all my learning until I was in my 40s. And I wouldn't have done that had I not gone traveling. I just wouldn't have. I know I wouldn't
Mhm.
have. And so when you travel and you go to those different places and just immerse yourself in it, that makes it. It really does impact you. It impacts your life, and you just want to make a change. You want to make a change for the better.
Absolutely. I'm a big believer in transformational travel. And
Mm,
what that essentially is kind of what you just said, that
mm,
you shouldn't return back the same person
yeah,
when you travel, especially
yeah,
the international travel where you're experiencing something so different. Like you should gain so much perspective
yeah,
and get out of your comfort zone that when you come home, you aren't the same.
yeah,
And I feel that way every time I travel. Like I learn something different, I
mm,
experience something, you know, and travel isn't always easy. Like things go wrong.
oh yeah,
I had so many things go wrong on my last two trips. No matter how much you plan, like sometimes you can't, it's not within your control.
yeah,
If your flights are delayed or your ferry gets canceled or a
yeah,
lot of things just go wrong. And
yeah,
so that is also an opportunity
mm,
to to problem solve,
mm,
to talk to
mm,
people, to navigate a new place.
yeah,
And sometimes like the change of plans ends up better in the long run.
Yes, yes. You know,
But
you have to take an opportunity, a threat, take a threat and make it, turn it into an opportunity. You know, do those things and think about something that happens that, you know, you may not like at the time. And don't think of it as, oh, this was done to me. Think it was done for me. You know, this was done for me because then I could go and do A, B, and C, whatever it might be, you know, and
yeah,
look on it as that.
we just had in Greece, like there was a ferry strike. So all the
Oh,
ferries shut down on a day that we were supposed to travel from one island to another. So we had to change our plans last minute, and that meant not only like rebooking ferries, but also rebooking our hotels, rebooking our tours. Like it really threw
no.
everything for a loop. Luckily for my friends, they were with me. So, you know, it was like 30 minutes on my laptop and it was all squared away. But we basically were supposed to spend one night on one island and 2 nights on the other island. And it ended up being the opposite. We had to stay on the first island for 2 nights and then go to the second one for one night.
Yeah.
And I was bummed because I was more looking forward to the second island. But in reality, once we got to the first one, we were happy we had to stay there. We wanted more time there.
Ah,
We liked it better. I was so glad to go to the second island, but I was actually grateful in the end that we got more time on the first one because the first one was much more much less touristy, more
mm,
chill.
mm.
We really enjoyed our time there. And so in the end, I was like, I was grateful that the universe switched it
Yes.
around for me.
Yes, I know. And that does happen, you know, when you're not expecting it, you know, and you just have to roll with it, don't you? You know, because these things come out of the blue. Look at the earthquake, you know, these things just happen. Um, well, do you know what, Laura? It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. I've really enjoyed it. And I don't think we've touched the surface, really. I think you need to come on. And I've been saying that to quite a few of my guests, actually. We've got so much to talk to. We've been talking for quite a while. And I could talk to you for, you know, twice as much time again. I've really, really enjoyed it. So thank you. Thank you so much for coming on.
You're
Um,
welcome. Yeah, thanks for having me.
And, you know, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. All the links and information about Laura can be found in the show notes. So that's all for today's episode of Wanderlust Diaries. We hope you found it informative and helpful. If you have any questions, feedback, or would like to be a guest, please feel free to reach out to us on our website or social media channels. All details are in the show notes. And remember, age should never stop your pursuit of adventure, and the world is waiting for you to explore its wonders. Once again, thank you very much, Laura.
Yeah, thank you.
And that concludes this episode of Wanderlust Diaries, celebrating the fearless spirit of solo female travellers who are 40 and beyond. I hope you found inspiration, valuable insights, and a renewed sense of wanderlust. Thank you to all our incredible listeners who have joined us on this exciting journey. Remember, age should never stop your quest for adventure because the world is waiting for you to explore its wonders. And don't forget to join our community on social media to connect with fellow travellers and subscribe and review us on your favourite podcast platform. All links are in the show notes. Keep dreaming, keep exploring, and stay fearless. Until next time, this is Terri Reynolds signing off from Wanderlust Diaries. Psst, don't keep me a secret. Please tell your friends and fellow travellers.